What do you think is James Hunt's legacy? If you could just introduce yourself to us, who is Freddie Hunt?
Who is Freddie Hunt? Well, I guess the most relevant bit of information for now is the son of James Hunt. But who I am myself, raised mostly by my mother, because as most people know, Dad died when I was very young. Raised in the countryside but grew up on horses mostly. Played professional polo from the age of 16 to 18 when I was all of a sudden thrown into a racing car. Well, not thrown into a racing car, but given the opportunity to drive a racing car. And it was actually at Goodwood. And this is a long time ago, back in 2006. So that's how my motorsport career started. My father, who I'm very proud of, obviously, particularly the way he sort of conducts himself in the good parts. Obviously, there were some good parts about his behaviour, but yeah, he was a gentleman. He was a very kind person. He was very hardworking, and from the little I can remember, he was a good father. And so it's just Dad to me. I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't know anything. I didn't understand, who he was. He was just my father. And after he died, for many years, I was aware that he was someone special. He was a sporting champion, but I didn't really understand the gravity of it until I started racing myself.
Before he ever went near motor racing, he was a very accomplished athlete right from school days. I mean, at school days, he was top of the class in sports. He was a great squash player, tennis player, and had he never driven a car, he'd have been winning in some other sport, whether it be football, cricket, tennis, squash, whatever, running, athlete. He was a great athlete.
What do you know about his junior career? He obviously had a reputation. He became known as Hunt the Shunt, perhaps unfairly. What was his?
I think that was fair.
Yeah. What was his junior career like? Would he have made it to Formula One if he was a modern junior driver? How did he get through that period?
I don't know how the finances relate compared to nowadays, but he built his own first car, which was a Mini. Wasn't too good, according to him, but it got him on the track, got him racing, and then he managed to. I think he took a loan, borrowed the money to buy a Formula Ford, and I think that's where the nerves came from mostly, not only for his safety, but more the fact that if he crashed his car, that's game over. So the throwing up before a race, which some people are aware of, which was shown in the movie, I think that was a little bit wrong in the movie. By the time he got to Formula One, he'd overcome those nerves. But the nerves were, I think, from the very early days, for safety and for fear of ending his career so soon. But he also did well enough in Formula Ford to be hired by March. He drove for March for, I think, a season or so, but crashed the car too often. I think he was quick and had some success, but too many crashes, and I think that's why he got fired. Again, I'm not 100% sure about this. But then the day he got fired, I think he met Bubbles Horsley, who was Hesketh driver at the time. They just bumped into each other in the car park, I think it was, and got chatting. He said, "Right, well, you're our new driver." And then they went to Alexander and said, "Here's the new plan. James is the new driver, and I'll be the team manager." And it kind of went from there.
You got to spend some time with him back in the 70s. Let's start with a opportunity you had in 1974 when you were, I guess, ordered to go to the Monaco Grand Prix with the Hesketh team.
ITN News in London wanted someone to go to the Monaco Grand Prix and make a film with James Hunt because James Hunt was big news at the time. My job then was to find James Hunt, get him to talk to me as much as possible about that season and how it was going, and get the film back in time for the lunchtime news on the Monday in London. The first day, he wouldn't really talk to me very much. I don't think he was very interested in anything to do with a film for the ITN News. When I offered him all my cigarettes, he warmed up a little bit, and we started to get on quite well. And Alexander Hesketh said to me, "Why don't you come to the yacht tomorrow? James will be here. We'll sit on the yacht, and he'll talk to you. If he doesn't want to, I'll make him." So I turned up the next day. We had a lovely chat. He smoked a lot more of my cigarettes. We started to get on really well. He was very charming. Very polite. You remember, this is a public school boy, and his wild image is not the whole James at all. We talked about the car. He didn't have high hopes for the race. On the Sunday, he qualified pretty well, actually. I think he did qualify in the top 10. He did well in the race, and then he got hit from behind, so he didn't finish the race. And after the race, he wasn't in a fantastically good mood. But he was very helpful by the end to me. So Hesketh was a great start for him, yeah? Because it was a small team. They knew that they had a bit of a superstar on their hands if they could get the car right, and Harvey Postlethwaite designed a very good car, and then he went out and won the Daily Express Trophy at Silverstone. And I don't think anybody been in any much doubt about that James was a good racing driver. But I don't think anyone at that time thought, "Wow, here comes the next British world champion." I don't think they did. I mean, maybe they did. I didn't particularly.
James, with no disrespect, it's not all that long since you were comparatively little known. Now your name's on everybody's lips. What's effected this magic transformation between Formula 3 and Formula 1 as far as you're concerned?
Well, really, it's the cars that have been provided for me. I got involved with Hesketh Racing at that point when things were really down, and Lord Alexander Hesketh put me in a car, put everything right, and he put me on the road. It was as simple as that. I haven't really changed myself. He's just given me the right opportunities, and I've got a very good team behind me now, which I never had before.
We said he kind of got off to a quick start, scoring podiums almost immediately with a brand new team. How much does that point to James's talent behind the wheel, would you say?
I think his talent was slightly underrated. Well, initially, people didn't really take him or Hesketh seriously. Again, this is all second-hand information. I wasn't there in these days, so this is just again what I've picked up from people I've spoken to. But then his talent was very much proven. Well, when he won the race at Zandvoort with Nicky breathing down his throat for, I think it was the best part of half of the race or so or more, and he held him off. Dad didn't know who was going to be driving for at the end of 75 because Hesketh pulled the plug and Dad was out of a drive, and I think it was Emerson Fittipaldi who was leaving McLaren, which McLaren didn't know at the time, and so Emerson rang up Dad and said, "I'm about to resign from McLaren. If you don't get a call from them, let me know." But this was, I think, like a month or two before the season started. It was really late in the day.
Alistair Caldwell, welcome to the Tyrrell Shed. Let's start with you. Where does your career in motorsports start?
When I was at high school, 12 years old, there were lots of people interested in motor racing. In fact, my class at high school, just farcical, I think there were 7 people in it who all got involved, including Howden Ganley, who became a Grand Prix driver. So, and I became a race mechanic as an amateur, working on my friends' cars and my brother's car. I suddenly decided that I would go to England and try my hand at being a Grand Prix mechanic, because in New Zealand, race mechanics were amateurs. They were people who did it in the summertime, and it was never a job. It was something you did, in your spare time. So I flew to England and landed on the Saturday, spent Saturday and Sunday with my aunt and uncle in Gerrards Cross. On Monday morning, I got my aunt to take me to McLaren's, which turned out to be just down the road. I asked for a job as a race mechanic, and the guy that interviewed me went upstairs and saw Bruce and Teddy, who owned the company, but I didn't see them. But Bruce knew who I was. He came down and said, no, we don't have any jobs for mechanics. So I said, do you have any jobs? And he said, oh yeah, we need a cleaner. I said, well, I'm a very good cleaner. And he said, okay, you can start Tuesday morning as a cleaner. So on Tuesday morning, I started as a cleaner, and I cleaned all day, which is very good. I'm good at it. And at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, I went over to the race mechanics, said, could I give them a hand? And they said, yeah, sure, do this. In fact, they told me to change the ratios in the gearbox. So I did. And then they gave me other jobs. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, they said, oh, we're going to go home now. When the guy that hired me as a cleaner came to work at 9 o'clock, he said to him, oh, Harry, he said, you need a new cleaner. This guy's a mechanic. So I worked as a cleaner for one day. And after that, I was a race mechanic. Within weeks of joining the Formula One company, I was actually running it. I didn't get the job for years, but I was actually doing it. So I got to be chief mechanic, and then I got to be racing manager, and then I got team manager. So in 73, 74, 75, 76, I was team manager.
That did mean you had to deal with some of the bigger issues, such as Fittipaldi deciding he was going to leave the team.
That was really quite interesting in the fact that Grand Prix racing still today is like that game of musical chairs. There's only so many cars and so many seats, and Emerson wanted double the money from Philip Morris. And Philip Morris, who was a guy called John Hogan, who was a friend of mine, who ran the Philip Morris sponsorship, and they were all pervading. They sponsored every driver in Grand Prix racing. Everybody had a Marlboro badge. You know, Marlboro was right through everything, through the veins of Grand Prix racing. And he wanted more money, and John and I, sadly, concurred that there was nowhere else for him to go. You know, he didn't have any options, so we could just say, no, you know, this is what you're getting, and that you'll just have to stick with that. But what we didn't realize was that he had decided to build a second Copersucar, which is this Brazilian-made Grand Prix car that his brother was driving. So he created a new seat. So at Christmas time, he didn't tell us until December, we got a telex back in those days, the big machine that went and sent this press release that said that he was going to drive a second Copersucar, which, by the way, was a terrible decision because they were never going to get anywhere with such a car. Anyway, meanwhile, Lady Hesketh decided that her boy was spending all the money and they had to stop. So she shut down Hesketh. So suddenly James was out of a drive, and we were out of a drive. And he literally rang me up and said, hello, you know, I think I must be your new Grand Prix driver. And I said, yeah, you must be.
When did you first meet him as a McLaren driver?
We went testing at Silverstone, in the snow. And he couldn't fit in the car even. We had to move the pedals forward, and he had to cut the end of his shoes off to fit in the monocoque. And we didn't do any testing because it was miserable and snowing. So we went to Brazil, and boom, he was on pole. And he led the race easily until, sadly, a trumpet fell off the engine and jammed the throttle open. And even that was a good result because it jammed the throttle open, so he crashed. But instead of stopping there, he got back on the track with oil steaming out the back of the car, with the car broken, and continued to race. And I remember Teddy saying, "Oh, that's terrible. You know, why didn't he stop?" I said, "Well, because he's a racing driver. So you know, if he wants to keep racing, well and good. You know, the fact that he broke the car is beside the point. You know, he's so adrenalized, so wanted to win."
When he first went to McLaren, I think what he had to do there was, and this was important, I think, is that he had to establish himself there as being a potential world champion, as being a really serious top driver, because leading up to that, they'd had top drivers. They'd had Emerson Fittipaldi. You know, they'd had the top guys in those cars. So when James went there, there was, to begin with, an element of, you know, is this guy really any good? And he had to prove that he was, and he did. So that was fine. But as far as as far as the engineering side, I don't think James really, he just wasn't into that side of it. And luckily he didn't need to be, because luckily the McLaren guys gave him a very good car.
And then on the other side of that, what was he like as a racing driver?
Well, he was obviously very quick, right from the start. He put the car on pole, and it was obviously the best car, and he was driving with the best team, but he put it on pole, and Mass, who was the long-term driver, was 4th or 5th or whatever. Like you say, I always remember Jochen saying to me on the plane, "Who's going to be number 1?" I said, "Jochen, the number 1 is the fastest driver. You might have number 1 tattooed on your forehead, but if the other guy beats you, you're number 2. And if he does it more than 2 or 3 times, you're definitely number 2. So we'll see when we get to Brazil." And after half an hour or so of testing, he said, "How am I doing?" I said, "Oh, you're 2nd and James is 8th or something." Then after another hour, he said, "How's it going now?" I said, "Well, not so good. You're 8th and James on pole." So, he put him in 2nd place straight away.
How big of a challenge was it to go up against Ferrari as McLaren?
Oh, it was a big challenge. I mean, that was part of the fun. They had 200 employees. They were an enormous team. They travelled with 2 lawyers and PR people and da-da-da. They were a big team. We were tiny in comparison. And so it was, their budget was greater. Everything about them was bigger. But they were Italian. And so the British mindset is a very good one for Grand Prix racing. The English are very good at Grand Prix racing. All the cars are still built here. And we played a lot of mind games with Ferraris. And of course, 76 was this incredibly fraught season where so much stuff happened. I mean, when it finished at the end of the year, we said if somebody wrote this down as a screenplay, nobody would believe it. Just farcical what happened. Terrible mistake in Spain, and my car got disqualified because it was too wide, which was my fault because I didn't measure it. That's a long story, but basically the tyres had changed, not the car. The car was exactly the same, so I didn't think I had to measure it, but in fact the tyres hung outside the wheels, which they didn't used to do. And so when we measured it, it was too fat, and so we got disqualified. But interestingly enough, we got that back.
Talking about Ferrari, they had a pretty decent driver at the wheel, Niki Lauda.
Yep.
His rivalry with James Hunt is legendary.
Yep.
How did it start? You mentioned they were friends. Is that how it started?
Well, if you watch the film Rush, which is a bit of a joke really, because it doesn't actually tell the story, but it's a story, you'll see that they crash at Brands Hatch in their early days, in their Formula 3 days, and they shout at each other and blah, blah. And this is true, but they came to Brands Hatch in James's Mini, and they went home in James's Mini, and they lived together in Knightsbridge in a flat. Yeah. So they were the best of friends, and they always were. On the racetrack, they gave no quarter, because that's the way it was. But in real life, the opposite of the film Rush was true. James and Niki were the best of friends.
I mean, have you met people like Niki Lauda, who he was such a big rivalry? Did you ever get to meet Niki?
I did, yeah. I met Niki a few times. And
First of all, what was Niki like as a person?
Hard. Very friendly, very friendly. And I think, good humour, but you've got to pay attention to spot it. Well, I did. I thought, was he giving me a bollocking, or is he having a joke? But no, he's a really nice guy, very supportive, and gave me a lot of good advice about my own driving, my own career, which was very, very nice of him.
And what kind of stories has he told you, or did he tell you about your dad? Did he tell you much about that time when he and him were fighting so close?
We didn't have that much time to talk about. I wish we did, but most of the times we met him, it was short on camera. Actually, the first time we met him wasn't on camera. It was at Hockenheim in 2009. Matthias, his son, was racing in DTM, And I met him on the grid, and before he even reached me to shake my hand, the first thing he said was, "I loved your father." And that was, yeah, very emotional.
Over 80,000 people turned out at the British Grand Prix a fortnight later to see if Hunt could repeat his French victory on home ground. Lauda could only manage second fastest in practice to Hunt. He set a new lap record at over 117 miles an hour. It meant the rivals would share the grid's front row, though Lauda's known for his superior starting technique. As it was, the off was indeed to provide plenty of action.
British Grand Prix, at the start, the two Ferraris hit each other coming into Paddock Bend. Races stopped.
Clay and Nicky managed to have an accident together. They hit each other on Paddock, and James ran over Clay because Clay flew off in front of him, and through no fault of his own, he flew through the air. You can very dramatic pictures of the car, 20 feet in the air kind of thing. Anyway, so it landed on its left front and bent the left front suspension. But James, being James, he just carried on. There were cars everywhere. There were cars flying off in every direction. And so James kept racing, even though his front wheels were like this, and because he had so much adrenaline. And he charged off down the hill from Paddock and up to Druids and around Druids. And when he was going around Druids, they'd already put the red flag up because the marshals already had cross flags and the big red lights on the gantry were already flashing because the race was being stopped because there were several cars in the boonies at Paddock. And he came down the hill to the back of the pits.
James's car is slightly damaged, but he makes it back to the pits. And the crowd is cheering and waving and throwing cans and, it's like a football match.
And Brands Hatch is a very interesting configuration because the racetrack goes behind the pits, and though it's very close, it's actually quite a height difference. There's 100 feet or something difference in the height. And so the pit road's up here and the racetrack's down there. So James was at the bottom of the hill. So he stopped the car, got out, ran up there. You can see this in the videos. He runs in the pit road, hair flying, and comes to me and says, I said, how's the car like? He said, it's stuffed, it's written off. I said, okay, we'll get the T car out, the training car, but you won't be allowed to start the race in it, but we'll put it on the grid. So we did. And then I went down and had a look at the car. Oh, this car's fixable. So we only had 2 cars per car, and we had 7 people working in the team, World Championship team. So I went and got the 6 mechanics, 2 off the T car, 2 off the other cars, and got them to get the car up in the garage, sent the truck man off to the truck, which was in the paddock, quarter of a mile away through a tunnel, to go and get the bits I wanted. I needed a wishbone, blah, blah. I gave them a list of bits. Off you go, get the bits. And they started to fix the car.
Because on the commentary, we hear that James may not be allowed to restart the race. There was pandemonium. I mean, bottles were thrown, cans were thrown, booing, hissing, cheering, all sorts of bad language. The place was just lit up until it was announced after all. I'm paraphrasing everything, but after a while it was announced, yes, James Hunt could start the race.
After 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever, we fixed the car. So I went back and said, we are taking our T car off the grid. I didn't say we're bringing the race car, but I just did. And Ferraris went, oh my God, because they realized what we'd done, that we'd fixed the car. So we fixed the car, and I literally got in the car and drove it down the pit road through the people, reversed it up to James, got James to put him in it, and took the T car away. So now James was starting the Grand Prix in his race car, which was absolutely 100% legal. And he restarted the race, and Nicky led for, 20 laps or something, and James, his car wasn't handling exactly correctly because it was a bit bent, but it was fine enough for him to eventually pass him and win the Grand Prix. Boom, boom, result.
James wins the race. Amazing. The place goes wild all over again. James loves the whole thing, jumps on the podium, grabs a cigarette off somebody, smokes on the podium, could never happen again. Wonderful, amazing event. How motor racing should be. Total theatre, crowd involvement, wonderful. Only problem is that after the race, James Hunt is disqualified.
There was a tribunal in Paris, because Ferrari's appealed, and it takes a long time for this tribunal. There's no appeal against the tribunal, and the tribunal consists of 3 geriatrics from 3 countries who probably have nothing to do with motor racing. Ferraris came up with a rule that didn't exist that said you had to do the cool-down lap, and therefore James didn't go back to the pits and therefore was disqualified. So they said, okay, he's disqualified. So they took our 8 points away from the British Grand Prix.
So at that stage, you think you're 2 wins in a row, flying high, arriving then at the Nürburgring, which was a legendary, infamous weekend.
Yep.
From your perspective, how did that weekend go down?
Nürburgring was always a big problem because of the length of the track, and the weather was always abysmal, and it was normal scenario. The weather was absolutely horrendous, and very few laps were done by anybody. Ferraris were 1 and 2 in the World Championship because they won the year before, so they had the first pit in the pit road, which in this case was a bit of a disaster because all the teams, and in those days the pits were tiny and there was no room for 2 cars outside a garage. So all the teams came in, and James came in on his own, first in, so jack, off he went. Now, the rest of them all came in. There was 2 cars for teams that had a space 10 feet long for 2 cars. They only had stuff to change the wheels for 1 car at a time. And Nicky came in, got first dabs because he was ahead of Clay, but now he couldn't go down the pit road. And literally, he was stuck in our pit for some time. I sat on the monocoque of his car and talked to him, and my mechanics checked if his wheels were tight, because we were using pins to go over the top of the wheel nuts, because I didn't want my wheels nuts to fall off, and one had fallen off Clay's car at the British Grand Prix, I think. And so we were fooling around. So Nicky was parked in the pit road, couldn't go anywhere for like 30 seconds. Whoop, 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 whoop. Enraged, because all the pit road was full of all these clowns. And eventually he got going. Now this is probably, I believe, why he crashed, because he was just so enraged about being held up. So off he went and flew off the road, crashed, and other cars hit the car, and everybody stopped because the road was blocked. And but Nicky was conscious and chatting. So everybody, when they all gone back to the pits to the restart, everybody was happy because Nicky had been burnt, but that was only just his face. He was chatting, he was talking, so everything, he's good. James was happy, and we restarted the race. Sadly, poor Jochen, they're all on dries now, so Jochen didn't win the Grand Prix. James did, and then after the race, we had this terrible news that Nicky was close to death. And interestingly enough, it was not the fire that did this, it was the fire extinguishers, because they were using dry powder fire extinguishers. And once again, if you watch the video, you'll see them hitting him in the head with the dry powder from 50 meters away to put the fire out. So this is what he ingested. This is what nearly killed him. And if you see the Rush film, they're digging it out, because dry powder is a terrible stuff. When it gets wet, it goes like concrete. So this is what nearly killed Nicky, not the fire.
Do you know what James's reaction to Nicky's crash was? Do you know if he reacted in a certain way?
I think words to the effect, you can't die because I need you to race against me. That sort of thing. And they were very good friends. I think he also, he joked. He said, "You're the only man that can have half his face burnt off and come out better looking." So there was obviously good banter, good humour between them.
You're the only person I could think of that could get burnt and come out better looking. Which is exactly what Nicky needed, because everybody else was going, oh.
No, but I think Dad was writing to him frequently and on the phone to him a lot when he was in hospital in the recovery period, trying to get him through it. As I'm sure many people were. But he really wanted him to come back because he wanted to race against him. And he didn't want to lose his friend, of course. There was just many ups and downs and I think, Dad and Nicky, the movie portrayed them not to be friends, but they were very good friends. But I think when it gets that hot between two competitors, it's probably quite difficult to maintain that friendship. But I think it was, which one was it? It was a few races before the end of the season. Dad and Nicky had adjoining hotel rooms, and Dad was still in bed. Nicky marched in, because Nicky could technically win the championship that race, and he walked in, and so I think Dad described it as a god-awful time in the morning, fully suited, marched in through its doors. So, "Morning, James. Today I win the world championship," and walked out again.
And then, getting towards the end of the championship, it's clear it's going to be close. Nicky's returned to the cockpit. He's racing again. I guess the build-up to that last round in Fuji, was there a difference in James? Did he become more tense? Was he...
Oh, well, there is an interesting thing here that we were testing at Canada. I had a policy of renting every circuit the week before, and nobody else had the smarts to do this because you weren't allowed to test on the week of the race. The last day you could test was the Saturday because you weren't allowed to test on the 7 days before the race. So I used to hire all the racetracks the week before, and I had hired Canada. And James and I were in Canada testing with a car and two mechanics. And the news came through that we had lost the British Grand Prix. So James got angry, and so did I, because this was total injustice. This was just kind of moronic. It was just so bad. We only had 3 races left, and mathematically it was almost impossible to win the World Championship. So we were at Canada and Mosport, and the motel was back in Toronto on the freeway. It was a long way away, and it was a huge motel, and it had a live band and a great big bar with tiered seating. So we had dinner, and then we were in the stands, and James was getting after the lead singer, and so she'd do a set, and then he'd take her off to his room and then bring her back again, and this went on until midnight. And by midnight we were both well pissed, James and I, and he was still servicing the lead singer. And I said, well, I've had enough of this, I'm off to bed, because we had to get up early to do the warm-up. I think we had to go at 7 to get up to the racetrack and do the warm-up in the morning. And so at 7 o'clock in the morning, James appeared with her in the same clothes as they had on the night before. So when we got to the racetrack, James would have been well pissed still. And we won the race. We got the 8 points. So then we went to Watkins Glen. We drove down to Watkins Glen, but the mood was still the same. And we stayed in a fantastic motel called the Seneca Lodge, which drivers weren't allowed to stay in. I was the only senior manager allowed there. And race eve, we partied again. And James had another girl, don't know who she was, and we partied. We danced on the tables at midnight. And then I went to bed, and James was still up and still partying at midnight. I don't know where he was staying. He wasn't staying there. And in the morning, we had to get up early to go to the warm-up. There he was, won the race. Boom, boom. So now, suddenly, the thing was getting mathematically a lot better because we won these 2 races on the trot. And James, as I say, was partying beyond midnight on both occasions.
The driving is only one part of being a Grand Prix driver, the actual driving. The rest of it can be, especially nowadays. I know we're talking about James Hunt, but I'm comparing it. I'm saying now, you know, if James Hunt was in Formula One now, can you imagine every step he took day and night would be on social media? Every step he took day and night would be in the papers, the magazines, the television, everything. I mean, the guy he wouldn't have time to drive the car.
Arriving at Fuji then,
Yep.
mathematical chance to win the championship. Still unlikely.
Yep.
What's James's preparation like for that weekend? Is it party or is he down to business?
We had told the journalists that the track was unsuitable because the loose surface was terrible, and there was rocks and stones and gravel. And since we had nothing else to do, I had got the T-car and put grills all over the brake ducts and over the air intakes and everything, which my boys had run up. And we put a cover over the car, and Nicky came down to see us, as he would do, because, as I say, he spent a lot of time in our garage, and chatted away to us, and the boys accidentally took the cover off, so Nicky could see these grills, and he pretended, that it was a mistake. But he tore off the pit road and told Ferraris, "Oh, you've got to put stuff over all the ducts of the car." So they spent the Friday, because Fuji's in the middle of nowhere. It's like Silverstone. There's nowhere near Fuji. In fact, it's worse. It's probably 100 miles from this big town. It's in the middle of nowhere. And so they tore around trying to get gauze to put over these openings of these Ferraris, and they did all 3 Ferraris with this gauze and put them in the pit road, for the first practice. And of course, we put our cars out, no grills. And Nicky came down and said, "You." They got him again. So he's playing games with them. Anyway, the race came, and this will be quite controversial now, because we had this business where we had this Grand Prix Safety Committee, which was James and Nicky and Mad Dog Jerry, and James and Nicky were in the tower having a nice time in the pouring rain, and we were having a miserable time in the pouring rain. But Bernie and I both wanted the race run, because without the race run we couldn't win the World Championship, and Bernie obviously wanted it run for the TV, and they had already delayed it. And I was getting my guys to start the cars up every half an hour and go whoop, 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 whoop. And the other teams would all start whoop, 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 whoop. They didn't know why, but we were running the cars, so they ran their cars. And James and Nicky, who were well out of it, they thought there was no way. It was now 4 o'clock or something, I forget. It was almost dark. It was the end of the day. And anyway, they said, "Okay, we're going to race." So suddenly we had the race on, and I believe that Nicky and James had agreed only to do 1 lap and then pull in, and they thought they could get the whole world, everybody to do this. So I think that's what they agreed. I only think. I don't, I have no facts to this. And then James was on the front row, and he won the start, and off he went. And there he was in the clear air, and the track was incredibly wet. You see this. He loses control of the car on the straight in the first lap. He's and the car's, going all over the place in the puddles, because there were huge puddles. But he was leading the race. He had a clear air. The rest of them poor mothers were, in this huge ball of spray. But James was looking good, and Nicky pulled in, and James, was in the clear. Sadly, he didn't pay any attention to his pit board at all. As far as I know, he never looked at the pit board throughout the race. You can tell when the driver reads the pit. He looks at it because it's on the straight. He looks, and James did not look.
You say he was a kind of concerned about safety, and yet to go out and perform like that when Nicky himself decided this is too much. What does that say about him as a driver?
Well, he wasn't the only driver that stayed out, and I mean, we don't have modern onboard footage like we, so it's hard for me to judge how bad the conditions were from the limited footage we've got from that race. But if you're out front and you've got a world championship that you can win, you haven't got the spray in your face, you haven't had a recent crash, and I think Nicky was really struggling trying to blink. And so I can really understand Nicky's fears, and it wasn't just Nicky that pulled out, several other drivers did as well. But Dad wanted to win the championship, and if he was out front, he didn't have the spray in his face, and he obviously made the calculation that this is this is safe enough, just about, and so let's go for it. Although he was advocating, like Nicky was before the race, to stop the race completely.
And it got so bad that we stopped showing them anything except cool tyres, and then we got the whole team, there's photographs of the whole team going like this to James, and James is not looking, absolutely not looking. And now Andretti, who's third, has already picked this up because of our excitement. So now he's cooling his tyres, and he won the race because of this. Not because of his team, because we told him to cool the tyres. So Andretti got the idea to drive in the puddles, but James did not. So James kept steadfastly driving on the dry bit, not reading his pit board, paying no attention at all, and eventually drove it down to the white. The bands would have appeared, I mean the canvas would have appeared on the tyres, so he still didn't react. He kept on driving. By now we just had a sign saying tyres, and in other words, we're ready for you to change the tyres, but he had to decide, not us. Because at no stage could we stop him and win the World Championship. So eventually he wore both left side tyres down to the air. So now he had two punches. So he had to come in. And the pit road at Fuji is enormous. It's like the full length of the straight. So he had to come slowly up the pit road with these two flat tyres, stop, and we had practiced many times changing with a front left or a flat tyre, but not two. We never thought to practice with two flat tyres. And so the jack, this is a kind of mechanical thing, the jack in the back is very easy to put in. It just goes under the car, whang, and as soon as it goes up, the back wheels are in the air, but the front gets incredibly heavy because it's now lifted up at the back. So the left front couldn't be lifted up. So the mechanic and I picked it up together and put it on the jack and changed the wheels. So it took a while. So we went out 8th, I think. But as it turned out, cars spun, cars stopped, cars crashed. And incidentally, he came across Clay Regazzoni, who in his Ferrari days, and he was still the Ferrari driver, would never let anybody pass anyway, but particularly James Hunt on the last few laps of the Japanese Grand Prix would never have got by him. And Clay, you see him in the pictures, goes like this, because he's been sacked, remember? He got sacked after Nürburgring by Ferraris. So this driver, who was incredibly aggressive and didn't let anybody by ever, went, go my son, go. So James finished third, and we won the World Championship.
When he retired, he became a commentator for the BBC alongside Murray Walker, a job he took to like a duck to water.
Between his retirement and really getting into the commentary, I think he was a bit lost, not a very happy chappy. And then when he started commentating, I think initially he didn't take it too seriously, according to Murray. This was. So Murray was not a fan of him at all to begin with, not at all. But I think, I don't know how long, whether it was a couple of races or a couple of seasons, I don't know. But then he started to really take it seriously and I think enjoy it as well. And he was a very popular commentator, the pair of, the duo with him and Murray. I think people like that very much, and he was very informative. And it's funny when he corrects Murray. Murray would say one thing, he said, "No, Murray, that's wrong driver," or whatever. And then, of course, all of it, he was quite brutal to some drivers. He didn't hold his. I think he said one driver's got a mental age of a 4-year-old and he should not be in Grand Prix racing, things like that. So he didn't want to get on his bad side, if you were. Nowadays, one would call that very unprofessional, but yeah.
I mean, there was nothing to win, you see. So when he had something to win, he was laser focused. But BBC commentary, I mean, he'd turn up a little bit late or something. He might be a bit tired. He might have had a drink or whatever. Anyway, of course, Murray didn't like this. But as time went by, they became very good friends. And James did a brilliant job as a commentator, which is a very difficult job. Everyone thinks race commentary is, you know, anyone can do it. No, not anyone can do it. It's quite a skilled thing to do well. And he said it like it is. He said what he thought. He didn't pull his punches. He didn't kowtow to corporate speak. He didn't kowtow to what sponsors liked or didn't like. He didn't kowtow to any particular BBC regime. He said what he thought, and he said it. He thought what he said, and he came out with it. He upset a lot of people, in particular Riccardo Patrese, when I believe well, I don't believe, I saw it, I watched it. He made some pretty disparaging comments about him, as he did with lots of other drivers. You know, for example, if he'd look at a corner at Spa and say, well, I mean, he's missed the apex by about, what, 15, 20 feet there? What's he doing? Shouldn't be out there. That sort of thing. But deep down, he was. I liked him and I respected him but there were the two sides for sure. You know, there was the wild man and there was the quiet, decent, studious, caring man as well.
Obviously, James lived through his career. Did he drive aware of that, do you think, or was it luck? How did drivers get through a career at that stage?
Quoting Dad, I can't remember the exact words, but words to the effect of that you have to make the decision before you get in the car. You weigh up the odds. Do I want to do this or not? And if you make the decision to do it, once you're in the car, you've got to put all fears out of your mind. Otherwise, you can't do it. If you get scared in the car, then it's career over. Something like that, he said. But basically, yeah, you've got to, you make the decision first, then you go for it.
What does it mean to you for Goodwood to be celebrating James Hunt?
It's an honour, really. I mean, Goodwood's, I suppose, one of the homes of motorsport, certainly in the UK, if not around the world. And this was the place, I don't know how many people know this, where he first tested an F2 car and an F1 car. So I guess there's a little bit of, speciality of this place to him. And Goodwood's, it's become such a huge event now, global event, and so it's just it's an honour, really. I think just all of them together, and no doubt there'll be a lot of Dad's fans, and just feeling the energy of that, the love for Dad. That's what's really really nice. When anyone comes up to me and says, "Oh, I met your father this," or "I loved your father so much," all these positive things, it gives me such a warm feeling of pride and love. So I think that's the most thing. The cars themselves, of course, and seeing them all together. I'm not sure how many Goodwood's going to be able to get hold of, but probably quite a few, I imagine. So yeah, it's exciting.